Howdy. Welcome back to Dion Talk. Things I've learned in Portugal so far. First, I'm going to start with things that are a little bit culture shock for an American traveling in Portugal. And then I'm going to cover the things that I've actually learned that matter to an investor. These are actually things I haven't heard on any YouTube channel that I've watched trying to figure out where I want to invest in Portugal. If I want to invest in Portugal. And stick around to the end of the video because at the very end, after the outro, I included a pretty strong warning on something I learned while I was here in Portugal. So the few things on culture shock. First, no right turn on a red light. Make sure you're aware of that. Second, bathroom lights are on the outside of the bathrooms. Third, pretty much everywhere has a bidet. Traveling around Portugal is a little challenging. There is a bus system that tends to go everywhere, and it is probably the most cost-effective way to travel. When you do that, make sure you have cash. There's an app. Everyone says the app is so easy to use, but even the bus driver couldn't tell us how to use the app. And when the bus driver got a little flustered that we didn't know how to use the app, he said, his actual response was, "I work here. I can't afford to ride the bus." The app is supposed to be cheaper, but the bus is fairly cheap itself. I pretty much use Uber to get everywhere. It's cost effective, about 3 times as much as riding the bus, but it gets you to where you're going. And there are Uber pretty much everywhere here. Originally, when I looked at Portugal, Porto is in the north, Lisbon is the capital, about halfway down the country. I'm looking in the Algarve because weather is one of the main reasons I'm considering investing here. They tend to have really good weather most of the year. They'll have a winter somewhere between December and March, but the second half of April is supposed to be a rainy season, which I haven't experienced yet, but it's coming up soon. I've looked around the Algarve, which is the southern region of Portugal. I started in Faro, where you fly into. We went to Dom Pedro Marina, which was pretty nice, a little on the spendier side. Then we went to, and I will say every one of these words wrong, Corvero, which is close to Portimão, which is a larger city. Portimão seems to have the best prices. Then we went to Lagos. Lagos, again, is a larger city. Next to Lagos is the city that I like the most. I think it's called Alvor. Probably pronounced something close to that. Behind me is the town of Lagos, and in front of me is the town of Alvor. Alvor? What separates them is this canal. So if you swim across this, you can walk from one city to the other. If you don't swim across it, it's about a 25-minute drive from one city to the other. They call it a tiny fishing village, but it's actually a pretty large city. And from a different angle, this is what they consider a small fishing village. But I had the best reception from the people there, and I think of all the beaches that I saw, well, it didn't have the interesting caves or the tunnels cut through to go from one beach to another. It seemed to have what I thought was the best beach. Best place to swim, best sand. I found that most places with jetties on the east side, closer to Spain, the sand was fairly rough and full of seashells. And on the west side of the jetties, for some reason, the sand was much softer. So those are the things that might have a little culture shock, other than I didn't realize Portuguese people were so into steak, which is a good reason to move here. There are more steakhouses here than there are Starbucks in Seattle. But here are the things I learned about investing in Portugal that I hadn't heard in any video, and that actually matter to me as an investor. First, the golden visa that we hear all the news about that came out in 2011 because the housing crash here was so severe, they were trying to draw investors in. The golden visa gets you access with a visa to dozens of countries in Europe. Was a strong draw. But now there's a housing crisis, they have enough investors, and everything I'm going to share as an investor, I want you to understand. These were conversations with realtors, agents working in the agencies where I went in to find properties. So these aren't things that I found in like a code book or found online with some law in Portugal. These were conversations, and these are my takeaways. So these might be inaccurate because think in your area. If you went up to the average agent, What might they not know? So this is what I took away from these conversations. First, the Golden Visa program is going away, technically for Russians and Chinese. But if you're from all the other places, it still exists. Not sure how I'm going to verify that in writing. Second, there are visas that you can get where you can become a resident. But if you invest and don't plan on living here year-round, it's actually beneficial on the taxes if you are a non-resident investor. Not only on the property taxes that you pay every year, which didn't sound like a lot, 300 to 500 euro is what I was hearing, so not much, but the tax benefits when you go to sell seemed a lot better for a non-resident investor. First, Portugal has something like the 1031 exchange, where you have 2 years to redeploy those funds and not pay the taxes on the sale of your property. It's better than our 1031, where you have 45 days to identify a property and 180 days to close on it. Here you have 2 years. Again, information from an agent, so we need to find another way to verify this information. Second, when you go to sell, and this was the convoluted tax class I got from the realtor, when you sell a property, 50% of the gains are taxed at 18% if you're a non-resident investor and 24% if you're a resident selling a property. Hope that makes sense because it took me a while to get my head around it. There was a little bit of a language barrier as well. Then as an investor, the layouts of the cities here are very different than what we have in the United States. What it seems like I've mostly found here in Portugal is the cities like this are mostly apartments. There could be townhomes that are packed together really tight, but as soon as you get out of the city, you have, like Gary, Indiana, burnt down buildings where the roofs are caving in, or rebuilt homes that sell for 1 to 2 million euros. The price of the apartments ranged anywhere from maybe 200,000 to 500,000 in the cities. If you buy an apartment, there's also something like an HOA fee that they call a maintenance fee, which could also have not only the monthly cost, but it could have the random assessment if something large needed to be fixed. Here was the loose breakdown I got from the realtor. The annual taxes on an average apartment are around 300 or 400 euro. The building maintenance fee is somewhere around 70 to 100 euro a month versus the 300 to 400 euro a year for the taxes. So when you buy an apartment, these are expenses you need to take into account. The monthly fee and the annual fee don't seem like too much. It's the random assessment that I would want to make sure you have a good amount of reserves for. I think of the places that I looked at, Portimão has the best prices. Corveiro is nice. Lagos is nice. The beaches are nice in every single location. Near Corveiro, you have the Benigil Caves, which seems to be one of the largest attractions in the southern region of Portugal. But of all the ones I've looked at, either Algarve because I like the town the most, or Portimão because I like the price the most, would be where I buy if I end up choosing to buy here. However, while one day I will make up my mind if I'm going to invest in Portugal or not, but not today. For now, I think it's going to take another couple trips here. I believe I'll come here again at the end of the year and see if maybe I can find a town where everyone is not in such a bad mood. I wasn't sure I was going to put this in the video, so I left it here at the end. There's also something, a bit of a warning if you invest here in Portugal, and this is something that I encountered with the agents that I talked to. You know how in the United States sometimes people complain about billionaires not paying their fair share in taxes because they're using the tax system legally to avoid paying taxes? Most of the people who complain about that have often already committed tax fraud. They buy a car or they sell a car, and to avoid paying a lot of taxes to the DMV in their state, they report the sale of the car at a lower amount than what actually happened. You buy a car for $5,000, you tell the DMV you paid $500 because it was a gift or because the transmission wasn't working or whatever your story is. A lot of people that I know have done these things with their taxes. Tax fraud. According to the agents here, it's very common to commit tax fraud with the property. The agent gets a commission of 5% if they have a license of the sale, and there are some unlicensed agencies that get 4%, so they compete with the ones that went through the legal hoops to become licensed, and I would recommend going the legal route because at least they're probably held to a higher standard, and you might have a better chance if you ever ended up in court. But the agents, from both types, said normally when you buy a property here, the seller reports a lower amount than what actually occurred so that their tax is less, and the buyer usually likes to report a lower price that was actually paid so that they pay a smaller amount because the seller doesn't have as many taxes to pay. Whatever the reason was, tax fraud seems to be normal. The reason I recommend not doing this is because it took me about a nanosecond to figure out the way that it would be easy to figure out if tax fraud was happening or not. The seller is going to report to the government the amount the property sold for. The buyer is going to report how much the property sold for. Seems like if everybody agrees, the tax people really wouldn't have too much to investigate. But if you remember when I started this morning, I talked about the agencies. If they're licensed, they're going to take 5% commission on the sale. If they're not licensed, they're going to get a 4% commission on the sale. Now imagine if you worked for the tax agency here in Portugal. How hard would it be to go and look up the sale of a property and then go and compare it with the commission that company got that made the sale happen? Easily recognizing the tax fraud that happened. So as a foreign investor, while prison is the ultimate house hack and not a bad retirement plan, it's not my plan. I hope this information helps you choose where you're going to invest or if you're going to invest out of the US. Until my next video, thanks for coming to my Dion Talk.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
The way I tend to get around is with Uber. Pausing the video for the sirens that go by about every 4 minutes.